But how much of Africa have you actually seen? Well, our next guest has visited all the 55 countries that are recognized as countries on the continent. According to him, you can't really talk about anywhere unless you've been there. Well, he's been there. Thebe Ikalafeng, the boss of Brand Africa. Thebe Ikalafeng, good morning. Thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you, Dan.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
Nekeli jealous, you know, Nekeli jealous watching you on Instagram and these pictures and the colors and the food everywhere as you were going around and sharing your journey on your timeline. Just overall, how was this experience for you?
I think it was very fulfilling. It was very enriching, but most importantly, it was very insightful. Because I think when you get to travel, you get to see how common, how similar you are to everybody. And to me, that was the most important part. Is I was seeing why I need to identify with the continent. As you know, as Fela Kuti once said, I must identify with Africa, then I'll have an identity. So I could see what that identity means. I could see what binds me to the rest of the continent.
I mean, I loved your t-shirt, I'm Africa. I mean, you had it in different colors, you went everywhere. What made you embark on such a project?
A couple of incidents. One of them I was in Switzerland having at a conference which I attend every year on entrepreneurship, and a Chinese woman was on the panel and from the Communist Party, and some young European boy put up his hand, a PhD student, and said, "You are sitting there acting all mighty, but meanwhile you are suppressing the people of Tibet." And she allowed him to speak, and when he finished, she said to him, "Have you been to Tibet?" And the man said no. So he says, "So what gives you the right to make comments about other countries? Because my family is from Tibet. I've been in and out of Tibet all the time." And I said, note to self, never make a comment about anybody's country unless you've been there. Base your knowledge on what you've read. Second one, I had coffee with the chief executive of Samsung for Africa. And I wanted to know, why is he so successful in Africa as Samsung? Why is there Samsung everywhere? And he says, because I've been to every other country in the continent. I've sat with the people, I eat with them, I know how they shop, I know their frustrations. We deliver products that meet their needs. I said, a whole Korean knows more about Africa than I do. But third and probably most important, Thabo Mbeki spoke in 2003 at the South African Tourism in Durban, and he sketched where he would go if he had to take time out in the continent and time away from his presidency and travel the continent. And he started painting how he'll visit the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania, how we'll go to Namibia, the sand dunes. He started painting such a beautiful picture of the continent, and I said to myself, I want to go on that journey. So I was inspired. But of course, the most important inspiration is from 1963, 24 May, when Kwame Nkrumah says, Africa must unite. We need to break the borders.
That was the foundation of the OAE, Organization of African Unity, now known as African Union. And of course, it is Africa Month. Okay, now you start the journey. One of the criticisms, I must bring this up, that you hear about traveling in Africa, that is expensive. That sometimes to go to a country, you have to go via Europe. When our government's going to get our airlines and sharing and flying to each other. Just an overriding one. Did you find it easy to go from one place to another? Did you have to plan quite a bit?
Well, I generally don't plan much. I'm very, I'm very intuitive and I'm very spontaneous. I used one passport. I used a South African passport, and there's only one time I had to go to Europe to come to Africa.
And what time
that's when I was going to Cabo Verde. I had to go to London and then to Portugal and then But I could have gone there from Senegal, but there was an infrequency of flights. So the challenge in the continent is really just that the flights around the continent. But I hubbed everywhere. I hubbed from Senegal, I hubbed from Ethiopia, I hubbed from Kenya, and I hubbed from Ghana to go to the different countries near the areas. So if you really want, you can get around the continent, but it does take a bit of patience. Our continent is a continent that requires resilience and patience.
Yeah. Now, you went to the 55 recognized countries, including South Africa. Of course, this is your own neighborhood. When you look back and you're looking back, I've seen the visuals. I saw you tasted all kinds of food. You met all kinds of interesting people, young and old. You went to the Orthodox churches, the old churches of Ethiopia, in those temples and stuff like that. Which one, in this journey, which aspect stood out for you, or which part of Africa left an impression on you that you, even today, you can't shake off?
Well, I think Liberia and Ethiopia, those churches of Lalibela were just incredible. I'm very spiritual. I remember being on top of one of the church in the middle of at midnight, 200,000 people with lights up during Christmas, which was the 6th of January. You know, and I had already pre-arranged for the high priest to come and pray for the shroud that's going to wrap me when I die. And he came in, and we arranged for the shroud. The shroud was there, and he arrived. And in the middle of all this, with people singing around, and I was standing on top of this church, and he prayed for me. And I thought, and he prayed for my shroud. And I thought, this is how life should be. This is how it should, and this is ultimate devotion, ultimate submission as a human being. And Liberia, I went to the Providence Baptist Church, which is where the freed slaves arrived to establish Liberia, or rather to declare the independence of Liberia, or their independence. It left such an amazing impression, because I went to the church there, and the sermons still resonate on the day, on how the priest was preaching. You know, I went over to him. I said, "You are going to preach at my funeral."
When we talk about food, I mean, you've got some wonderful pictures of all kinds of food. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, if you go to West Africa, you'll hear about jollof, and you go somewhere else, you hear about something else, and you'll be tasting. Which for you, I mean, which food did you enjoy the most?
I think West Africa has got some of the richest food. You know, from Senegal, Cheboujen, which is I think they've got the richest food, not just from the food itself, but also the eating culture. Because, you know, eating together, I think you've seen some places when people begin to eat, it's a festival. Even everyday meal is a festival. People eat together from Cheboujen, from Senegal. You go to Jollof, you go to Chad. Everywhere I go in that part of the world, I think eating food. But what is quite interesting is the competition between Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, and Senegal as to who makes the best jollof. So I settled that whole argument this past weekend by inviting the lady who won the best jollof rice competition in West Africa, and I met her in Gambia, and she came around this weekend when I had an Africa Day celebration.
So she's from Gambia?
She's from Gambia. She came around. She cooked jollof for all my guests,
and that's the best
jollof.
We
had fun, best jollof ever. But I had Nigerian friends who said to me, "How do you embarrass us like that? We could have cooked the jollof for you." I said, "But you don't have a crown," and she's got one.
Yeah, well done. Gee, you know, just listening to you, I'm already thinking, oh, I need to do something similar. You know, just go around, because I know only a little part of Africa, and it's Southern Africa mostly. Yeah, our neighborhood.
We should all travel the continent, because we'll get to break away some of the stereotypes that exist about the continent. Because much of what's written about Africa is not what we've written. By traveling, by connecting, by meeting, we are rewriting the narrative and returning Africa to where it's belongs.
And most times it's written by foreigners, people who are foreign to the continent. Language-wise, did you manage? I mean,
well, it's only generally French or English.
Okay, so you managed.
Between French and English and your finger and pointing and sign language, you'll do just fine. Yeah, you know, there's only Spanish in Equatorial Guinea, but the rest of it, you get along just fine. The most important thing that matters is not so much the words, but it's your attitude, your behavior, how you treat other people. Because remember, everybody, when I was in Madagascar, and I went to this family who's the cleaners, I said, "I'm going to have dinner with you." When we left the house, and said to me, "It's the first time anybody's ever visited me in my country. People who come onto this island, they look at us as workers. You treated me like a human being." He says, "My life is going to be blessed this year." That's who we are as Africans.
Thebe Ikalafeng from Brand Africa, a man who's visited the whole of the continent as part of flying that flag high for Africa. I am Africa. You must check out his Instagram post. You will be amazed.